If you're going to go in that sort of investment banking, consulting type of world, or product manager for Procter and Gamble or something, those are where those kind of skill sets work. But if you're going to do what you want to do, and nowadays with mobile and the internet, you can build an app, you can build a company, you can do it without, you don't need the degree to prove to yourself that you can do it. You just need the skills to get up and start rocking and rolling. And so there's a punk rock kind of DIY, do it yourself kind of attitude that I really love, when taking your own sort of destiny, and these skills can help you along that path. So yeah, I think that an MBA is worth it if you're going for those kind of criteria. If you're not going for those kind of criteria, you're not on that kind of path, it may not be, the best way, the use of your time or your hard-earned funds.
Welcome to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with Nicholas Kuhner. Let me start off with John Cousins, who's our guest today, has a remarkably diverse career spanning science, music, and business. Early on, he served as a CEO of a biotech company developing innovative cancer diagnostics. He later channeled his business expertise into education, writing best-selling books on finance and founding MBA ASAP, which is the theme of our podcast today, which is an online business education platform that makes MBA level knowledge more accessible. But beyond the boardroom and classroom, John is also deeply involved in jazz and the arts, so he's a kindred spirit, and even authored a book on jazz titled Annus Mirabilis, 1959, The Greatest Year in Jazz. We're not going to talk about that because I know absolutely nothing about jazz unless it has got something to do with Dave Brubeck. So this unique blend of experiences in cutting-edge science, musical improvisation, and structured business strategy gives him a very rare and cross-disciplinary perspective. So, welcome.
Nicholas, it's a pleasure. Annus Mirabilis, yeah, that's the Latin term for a miraculous year. 1959 was the year. And like you say, Dave Brubeck, the interesting thing is his most famous song and album, that Time Out 5/4 song, that was recorded and published in 1959. It's one of the Annus Mirabilis records.
A great year. Well, I mean, Dave Brubeck is my go-to because he's more Bach-like, so I can understand what he's playing.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about your MBA ASAP today, but I just want to sort of structure the discussion a little bit, because you've played in the jazz world, built hedge funds, taught MBAs, and also worked on cancer diagnostics. So this is not a typical CV. But all of these kind of include fast thinking, pattern recognition, and navigating uncertainty. So how have you used, how has perhaps jazz taught you about leading teams under pressure, and from the clinical side, so in your biotech days with a very high stake cancer research industry, changed the way that you approach creativity or even business strategy? So if that's not a good start, I don't know what is.
Well, that's a great, fantastic question, Nicholas. And yeah, I mean, if you think about what do these things all have in common, and you're right, pattern recognition, improvisation, basically thinking quickly, making decisions with less than perfect information, which of course we always have to do. That's really the entrepreneurial bent. Building companies is the same as sort of building a solo or something, in ways. But yeah, my career essentially started out, I was an electrical engineer, and I worked in recording studios and then worked for American television, and then went and got my MBA. I wanted to marry some engineering skills with business acumen so that I could make companies and things. And that's what I ended up actually doing. So even though it's not and only in retrospect can you really see how the dots connect, going forward, it's like, what, all this different disparate things. But I basically have been relatively opportunistic during my career. When opportunities presented myself, the ones that I could recognize, I would try to go and carpe diem, seize the day on those, whether they were in a field or not. Now, going originally as an electrical engineer and then investing through another company and becoming the CEO of a biotech company, we were developing cancer diagnostics and therapeutic tools using a porphyrin compound that binds to cancer cells because they have more of these lipoprotein sites on them, not to get too technical. And so this would bind to those lipoprotein sites and then fluoresce under ultraviolet light. Put me to sleep already. And so, but for me, it's all about learning and unlearning and relearning, And so one of my teachers at business school was an entrepreneur. And he said one of his great skills, and also the great Barry Diller, said the same thing, that was to be able to learn a subject very quickly and figure out what is sort of the Pareto principle, right? The 20% that'll give you the 80% of results. What are the things you really need to know? Like learning a foreign language, what are the top 300 words that you need to know to get started in, or whatever, that'll give you the biggest bang for the buck. And so that, as a skill that I've really tried to hone, is accelerated learning. Because suddenly I was running a biotech company, and I had had a little bit of biology and physics and all, but I really had to get up to speed on medicine and biology and physics for the fluorescing compounds and all these different things, besides figuring out how to raise money. And I ultimately took that company public and had to go through that process and then do all the public reporting for a company and all that kind of stuff. So it was a constant really having to learn things fast and being comfortable and confident that I could grasp a subject maybe in a couple of weeks if I really studied hard, enough to start to get by and gain some traction in it. So that's been, I think, a key to my career, and to this day is what I try to do, is just learn subjects fast. So anything I can dive into and figure it out relatively quickly and start to learn, especially in an environment we're living in now where things are so accelerated, and they're going to rapidly accelerate more. We have artificial intelligence and robotics and bioengineering and genetic modifications, all kinds of different things that we have to sort of keep on top of, and they're coming at us very quickly. And how do we keep relevant in the world? Like Darwin said, it's not the strongest or the smartest or that survive, it's the most adaptable.
John, I was trying to pull a silver thread throughout your career, and I mean, you've done 5 lifetimes basically, if we think about it, because a lot of people in the cancer research side, that can keep you really busy for a couple of lifetimes. Jazz can keep you busy for a couple of lifetimes. You're now in the not in the venture capital, in the hedge fund business, and you've got the MBA side. But it seems that the teaching side has kind of been consistent throughout your career, or not necessarily pedagogy, but the sharing of knowledge. And what I love what you mentioned there in terms of how quick things are going and how quickly we need to adapt. Now that is, and maybe we can split people into 2 groups. There are those who are adaptable and are able to take masses of new data, new information, and apply it quickly at a very sort of top line level. And then there are those who are going to be focusing on very niched areas. So maybe talk to me about who your MBA ASAP is for, because you can't make everyone happy. So let's talk, who is this for?
No, you're right. If you don't niche to some niche, and have certain people, if you try to be everything to everyone, you're nothing to no one, right? You dilute all your efforts. And so, yeah, and you're right when you said that teaching is a thread. I would say that, not necessarily, like you say, pedagogy, but teaching, management and leadership. And I love being a manager and a leader in companies, and having people that I'm cultivating their skill sets and trying to help them grow and watch them bloom. You take someone and they have, they come in, they might be a little cautious, they might be a little worried if they make a mistake or stuff, and having them understand and learn how to gain in confidence and take on more tasks and learn that they can do more things and watch someone grow like that. That's basically teaching in a managerial sense, creating a team that gets more and more skills sets and having people stack skills so that they have more skills. I consider myself, you're right, there's lots of niche people that are like PhD, very, very focused on one thing. And then there's generalists, and that's what I am, sort of a Johannes Factotum type of, jack of all trades, know lots of different things at a certain level, but not super deep, but then try to make creative collisions between things to see what might work from what's transferable from one field to another in problem solving type of ways. And so, yeah, the educational technology came out of, I started teaching, my sister was teaching a finance course. She was working full time as a financier, teaching at night at university. I thought that was so cool, teaching. I never thought of that. And so I started teaching. I knocked on some doors and got some university, appointments, and started teaching and realizing that, first of all, the textbooks are like this thick, right? 800 pages on accounting or finance or marketing or whatever, strategy. And I was thinking, well, in my day-to-day world where you're really moving quickly and making decisions and operating a company, you don't have time to know all these fancy different things. I could boil it down to 20 pages of here's the fundamentals of what you might use every day. And the other things you may experience from time to time once in your career, and they may be intellectually interesting, so they get consolidated into a textbook in a university setting, but they're not necessarily something when you're banging it out every day in the real world that you're going to use. So I started to approach my students and my classrooms like a laboratory, and I would teach them and see what they really knew. And very quickly, I realized that they couldn't see the forest through the trees. They had all this knowledge from all these books they'd been reading, and they really had no context to say, this is important and this is less important. This is the kind of stuff I'm going to use every day. This I may, it's interesting, but I'm not going to be, doing these incredible calculations for, weighted average cost of capital every time I, turn around to do a finance deal or something. It's going to be a negotiation, right? You're going to give me money. Okay, this is what you want. We agree. Oh, boom. Okay. And move on. So that I started to see the light bulbs go off in my students as I would teach them, and then realized that I started making little white papers in my slide decks. And from there, I started making some books out of it, and then started recording my lectures and then doing it in my own little studio, because suddenly the technology caught up to a place where there were these platforms where I could put up videos and PDF books and things like that, downloadable content, and disseminate it just like we're doing right now, right? Disseminate things all over the world through the internet. And so I started to make my EdTech, my educational technology platform, and started to get students that way from all over the world to try to teach people the skill sets, business skill sets that they can learn ASAP. In America, it means as soon as possible. It's an acronym for ASAP. And I say that because I have students in 168 countries all over the world. And a lot of them don't know like an acronym like that. That was my brand, right? But I had to explain that sometimes. The distilled knowledge boiled down to here's the fundamentals, like blocking and tackling in football or whatever, the things you really need to know. And then you can get going. You can learn these things quickly. They're not hard to learn. And then you can get going with whatever else you're doing. And it's for people that are, first of all, they maybe not near an Ivy League university or a fancy college. They don't have the time to take 2 years out to go get an MBA degree or a business degree. They don't have the $200,000-$300,000 it would cost to do that. But they could use those skills. Maybe they're running a bakery. Maybe they're an auto mechanic. Maybe whatever. And they need to talk to their accountant. They need to figure out how to get new customers in through marketing. They have to have it's better if they have a strategy and they can see a bigger picture for what they're doing. So whatever anyone is doing, stacking some business skills on top of the other skill sets you have, I think is really beneficial. And that's the approach I've taken. And so a lot of my students are, the demographics vary. Some of them are young and they're just starting out and they want to learn about entrepreneurship and they want to learn about how to build a company. And some of them are mid-career and they want to understand how to read financial statements and talk to the finance side of the business to help them up the career ladder. Some of them are getting towards retirement and they start thinking about, I have to start investing so that I have money coming in from passive income sources. So how do I value to buy a rental property, or how do I value, is this a good stock to buy or something like that? So it varies across, and everybody has different concerns, but these skill sets are broadly applicable to to a lot of people. I don't want to say, everybody needs them, because then again, and also, we were talking about the world being a rapidly evolving place and trying to guess Futurists, you look back to the 1970s and 80s and things, no one was guessing that the internet was going to come along. There was none of these people. They were extrapolating off of what was happening then, like we hear about flying cars was going to be the thing, because they were thinking about what's oh, and they're thinking, okay, well, they're flying cars. But the world has changed so much with in our digital world, social media and the internet and now artificial intelligence, and no one is predicting that. Futurists, it's really hard to predict where the world's going to be in 10 years, even 5 years. And so these skill sets, the business skill sets, accounting's not going to change. These number things, marketing changes in how you deliver it, but the awareness campaigns and messaging and storytelling kind of skills around marketing or strategy, how to do, or negotiations, these things are going to be constant. And that's one way to think about your future, is not trying to predict what's going to be the changes so you can anticipate those, but think about what's going to stay the same and get that knowledge.
Well, thank you for ruining my next 4 questions, because, I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask, and I'll give an example of myself. I've signed up and been accepted to 3 MBA programs. One was MBA program in Taiwan, and I think I was 26. And then there was another one where I was at Wharton. It was NTU in Singapore, and it was a Wharton and Cornell MBA, so it was an executive MBA. And then the last one that I was doing was an online MBA with a German university. And I didn't finish any of them. Halfway through the German one, I was like, honestly, I'm not going to be an HR director. I don't need to know these things. This course sounds like it might be quite useful for people who want to dip their toe in before spending $200,000, because if I look back I did a brilliant marketing degree, and we were talking about all of these very high marketing concepts and brand strategy and portfolio analytics and all of these things that you do when you become a director of marketing, not when you go into the entry level junior brand manager level. Maybe talk to me about what is the best time. And you did mention, that's why I said you ruined my questions, because what is the best time to do an MBA, and how does your course perhaps help folks decide whether an MBA actually, a full MBA really is the best thing for them, and is an MBA actually worth it anymore, coming from somebody who's got an MBA from an Ivy League university?
Yeah, that's a great question too, Nicholas.
That's why they pay me the big money, because of these questions.
Yeah, that's right. I went to Wharton, and Wharton at IB. I ended up at Wharton because I was an engineer, and that was like a quant jock school. That's where the quantitative people would go for finance and all. Other big programs like Stanford and Harvard and things were more case study oriented, where you'd read a case and then you'd narratively figure out how to solve the issues in that case, where Wharton was more numbers and applying math, sort of financial engineering. And so I thought that would be good for me. And I wanted to go to one of those highfalutin schools because I wanted to make sure, first of all, could I do it? And then if there's any secret knowledge, esoteric knowledge that they teach that would help me to navigate the world after that, like a Knights Templar or something, I wanted to know what that was. And it turns out there isn't anything like that. It's pretty much common sense. It's common sense. It's businesses, create something of value, make people aware of it, and build it for less than you're selling it for. It's pretty much not that difficult. You can make it very difficult and complicated, but when you boil it down, it's not. And I really like what you said, Nicholas. It's absolutely correct that's another way that I put this together and present it is, it's a way to dip your toe in and see, is this right for you? If this type of material really, you love thinking about strategy and marketing and finance and operations and management and leadership and negotiations and all that stuff, you just can't get enough of it, and you love going down those rabbit holes, it's a test. And then, yes, this is a good program. It's worth me then investing a significant amount of time and a significant amount of money to go through a whole program. And if you take something like my program, you also have a leg up when you get into the program, because you've at least been
sensitized,
to accounting and stuff. Yeah, you've been some of these buzzwords, some of the different basics of the course. So it's not like totally a blank slate. I remember when I went in, I had never had any accounting, and I went into my first accounting course at Wharton, And this guy just took off, like writing these T charts and putting up all this stuff and using all these words and stuff. And I was like floored. I had to go and just read the accounting book, and it scrambled to try to catch up. Talk about accelerated learning. And I wish that I would have had this course as a preparatory thing before I had gotten into that deep end of the pool. It would have really been helpful. I would have been able to understand more of what he was saying in the first couple of weeks than I did, because I was just trying to, what does that acronym mean? What is he saying there? I have no idea. And so, yeah, in a preparatory sense, it's worthwhile if you do decide to do it. And if you decide, no, it's not for me, well, at least you have some of these words and skills and concepts about how a business is run, so that then you can go and apply those to really whatever else you do. If you're getting a car loan, or if you're buying a house and you have to think about a mortgage, or if you're whatever it is, or a rental property, or investing in the stock market, or there's lots of ways that this stuff is applicable to you. Negotiations, I mean, everything is a negotiation, right? We don't get what we want in life, we get what we negotiate. Even if it's your partner, what movie are we going to go see tonight, or where are we going to go to eat dinner? Everything has some sort of negotiated basis to it in a social setting. And so these skills are much more broadly applicable. And to your point about whether or not it's worth it, that was my big question, and that's why I came to making this type of easily acceptable, easily affordable, do it in 6 weeks kind of a program, because I spent 2 years full time. I didn't work going to Wharton, and the tuition was significant. It's like $100,000 now. See, figure if you're making $200,000 a year, $100,000 a year, that's $200,000, and $100,000 tuition, that's twice, that's $400,000, and living expenses. I had a young family when I went. I went a little bit late. You also said about when's a good time to go. Most of my peers there were just out of university. Maybe they did a year's stint at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs or one of those kind of places. And this was the next step in their imprimatur of going up this certain ladder of these elite companies looking for these elite degrees. And if that is not what you want to do, then you don't really need that kind of course. And these days, there is a degree from an elite institution is a signaling mechanism. That's really what part of what it's prized as. It says that I can do this, I can sit through this, I can understand this material. And because when you go to negotiate for a job, right, it's very asymmetric information. The employer is trying to figure out, are you capable and competent and smart enough to do what I need done? And you're trying to present yourself as you are, and you're trying to it's like dating, right? You're putting your best foot forward. You're really showing your best thing. You're not saying any of the bad things about you. So it's hard for the employer to get a good idea about the person. So using the degree as sort of a proxy for talent or whatever is basically where its value lies. If you're going to go in that sort of investment banking, consulting type of world, or product manager for Procter & Gamble or something, those are where those kind of skill sets work. But if you're going to do what you want to do, and nowadays with mobile and the internet, you can build an app, you can build a company, you can do it without, you don't need the degree to prove to yourself that you can do it. You just need the skills to get up and start rocking and rolling. And so there's a punk rock kind of DIY, do-it-yourself kind of attitude that I really love, when taking your own sort of destiny, and these skills can help you along that path. So yeah, I think that an MBA is worth it if you're going for those kind of criteria. If you're not going for those kind of criteria, you're not on that kind of path, it may not be, the best way, the use of your time or your hard-earned funds,
You mentioned the Templars earlier, and I suppose it's going to be similar to the Freemasons. What an MBA basically does is it opens you up to this next level of language that people are expecting at that level of business. So if you are going for the Fortune 500s and the large companies, an MBA unlocks the kind of terminology and secret words, the shibboleths that people use in those industries. And John, not all MBAs are created equal either, so that's another big issue. And I hear that the current Harvard Advanced Basket Weaving MBA is a hot potato at the moment. Now, I want to talk about I want to just, and I'm going to challenge you a little bit here. I hope you don't mind.
Yeah.
But the whole name MBA, obviously you've called it MBA ASAP because that's the terminology that people are using. What would you prefer to call MBA? Because an MBA, Master of Business Administration, that's so, that is so pre GPT basically. What would if you had a choice? What would you love to call this course? Because we obviously have to call it MBA because that's what people are looking for. But what do you think this course should actually be called?
Oh yeah, Destiny Leverage 2000 or something.
Yeah, because I mean, MBAs honestly, I after my third MBA, actually I won't lie, it's my fourth MBA. My wife said you are not allowed to do any more. You're not allowed to apply for any more MBAs. And after a while, I was like, I really don't need this. I just want the overriding concepts. So yeah, I wish I'd come across something like yours. And the problem is, John, is that there are so many 30-minute MBAs, 30-day MBAs that it's the value is by being diluted. But I see, your background, the experience that you've got. I'm kind of thinking that you've had a bit of creative license with this MBA based on your experience to really chisel it down to something that is going to be actually relevant to people who need functional MBA tools versus just the case studies. And let's talk about GE. Who is going to start a new GE or work at GE, for example? GE is actually going down the tubes at the moment, so they're not even a great example. Maybe talk to me about how you've structured it to be relevant for this fast-moving AI age that we're in now.
Well, and that's exactly right. You put it so eloquently, Nicholas, and trying to whittle it down and trying to make it so that people, can get the information. And so I have to make some decisions about, well, what has been really important to me and what has been the distilled essence of these things. And then also from a pedagogical standpoint, what is relatively easy to convey, and get across so that people can understand and comprehend it. So the one part that I focus on, because also it's relatively clear to teach, and it's also the part that I think that a lot of people don't have because it's not necessarily intuitive, is the numbers side of business. And that's what I really started with. And I thought that, at first, my first course I did on the Udemy platform, and that's a really great platform. You can upload stuff. And I did a corporate finance course. And I thought, well, I know a lot about it. I can put up all the material, but I didn't think that people would really like it that much. I thought it was too sleepy and unsexy of a subject. People want strategy and marketing and negotiations and all these kind of things where it's more the alpha kind of, thing. And that this would be like, oh, brother, the numbers, and I don't like numbers and all that. It became really popular. I was so surprised. And so then I took that as an indication that that was something that people were interested in. And really, when I first went for an MBA, I was an engineer. I was working for ABC Television. It's the television network in the United States. And I was designing and building facilities for the network, these broadcast facilities. And I picked up the annual report for ABC and, flipping through it. And there's these financial statements in there, an income statement and a balance sheet and a cash flow statement. And I realized that I can't read these things. This is impenetrable to me. And I knew that it must be important in the world, that this is sort of like that, like you say, the Masonic shibboleth knowledge that I didn't have. It's like, well, I better learn that if I want to know how the world operates. So that was really one of the things I wanted to do, is just learn how to read financial statements. And so once I learned that they're not that difficult to read, and there is like a guild mentality of all of these buzzwords and stuff to make things look harder and more obscure and difficult than they are, to sort of keep the guild, reduced to a certain amount of people.
Yeah.
And it's not that difficult. And, the money comes in, there's expenses, and the money goes out, whatever, and that's about it. And here's the tools. Financial statements are the end product of accounting. That's what accounting generates, are these reports, these financial statements, those 3 financial statements. So I try to break it down into learning that first, how to read and understand financial statements, And then that gives you the whole sort of retrospective side of business, the scorekeeping side of, accounting is what's happened in the past, and here's this report of it. And then you take those numbers and you project them into the future, and then you discount those future cash flows back to the present, make a present value, and that gives you a value for what this income producing company or asset is over time. And that's the forward-looking forecasting. So you have the retrospective part, sort of like the rear view mirror, and then you have the prospective part, sort of like if you're driving a car through the windshield, and that's the finance part of it. And so that's what I break down, the number side of business, so people can understand the retrospective and the prospective side of business and how we use numbers to keep score. It's like the money comes in, and hopefully you don't spend more than you brought in so that you have some left over to replenish the business and to pay yourself and all. And so that part is a core part of it. And then the other part is the outside part of it is marketing and strategy, and how do you think about those kind of things relative to kind of the number side. But getting the number side is sort of the core thing that's very teachable and very learnable. And it's also something that not a lot of people have been exposed to. So a gap that can be filled. And so that's been my sort of my pedagogical theory behind how I structure this.
I had a boss at Interbrand, and the one thing that he did teach me that I'll always be grateful for is when you're looking at clients, potential clients, if you're looking at joining a business, always look at the annual report. They literally tell you everything about the business. And if you can read that annual report, you can go in and give them solutions, or you could sell something into them. Or if you are a potential employee, you can say, I see this is what your plan is for the next 5 years. This is how I can fit into it. This is the value that I can bring to the organization. So just being able to read or understand how an annual report works is such a valuable tool. So I absolutely love that. So I'm sold. So the rest of us listening to this are in the same place. It's about learning the vocabulary of that next step up that you want to reach. So if you do want to get into that next step, or you have to engage, or you want to sell your business, or you want to build a business, there's a certain language, class of people, or that caste of people, if you're from a religion, if you want to look at from the priestly class, this is the language they use. And if you can use the same language, it means you'll blend in slightly better. So I could chat to you for hours on this, but let's just talk about perhaps if an airplane is you're on an airplane flight to one of your trips, and it is going down into the sea, and this is tickets. What is that piece of music that is going to go in your head, John?
Wow, that's a piece of music. Well, it may be, up there in Scandinavia, maybe some black metal or death metal type of thing. Try to go out with a confident bang. There you go. Yeah, exactly.
I like it. John, where can I send folks to? I mean, we haven't even discussed the other 60 books that you've written. You've got 61 to date. I'm sure there's a couple more. Where am I going to send folks to learn a little bit more about your MBA ASAP course?
Thanks, Nicholas. Yes, the website is MBA-ASAP.com. And that's the place to go. And there's a sign up for the course, obviously, there, and also my email list, a newsletter kind of thing. And I answer, anybody emails me through that. It's John, John, at MBA-ASAP.com. And I love talking with people and answering any questions and things. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, your personal website is also pretty snazzy. I was like, wow, that looks nice. I feel a bit down in the mouth looking at that when I compare my website. So good job on that. So if people want to learn a bit more about your background and why they should actually listen to you, I would go to that website, and I will stick that in the link in the description as well. John, this has been fabulous. Thank you. And I am very jealous of your very comfortable looking chair.
Yeah, I fall asleep. Thanks, Nicholas. It's been a real pleasure. I really appreciate it.
I really do appreciate your comments. So why not go and watch this live on YouTube, or go to my website, kuhne.no. That's KUHNE.no for more information.